Live from London, this is Global Business.
Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Robin Dwyer.
And I'm Sally Burdett. Our top stories. The OECD upgrades its outlook for the global economy, thanks to strong growth figures from China and the United States.
More pain for American households and businesses as interest rates remain on hold.
Weight loss drugs taking the world by storm. Better than expected profits for drug maker Novo Nordisk. Europe's most valuable company races to meet demand.
In the United States, dawn raids on pro-Gaza protests at the University of Southern California as police use batons and stun grenades to break up the occupation.
And a shift in China's migrant workers, with fewer in construction while numbers keep growing in the service sector.
The outlook for the global economy has been lifted by the OECD, thanks to stronger than expected growth from China and the United States.
According to the Paris-based Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the global economy is now forecast to grow 3.1% this year and 3.2% in 2025. But it says the pace of recovery diverges widely across the world, with Japan and Europe lagging behind and substantial uncertainty continuing to cloud the international outlook.
Well, despite strong growth in the United States, there's been little cheer for households and businesses after the Federal Reserve decided to keep interest rates on hold.
The Fed's chair, Jerome Powell, said that while inflation had eased, it was still too high to consider a rate cut.
We've stated that we do not expect that it will be appropriate to reduce the target range for the federal funds rate until we have gained greater confidence that inflation is moving sustainably toward 2%. So far this year, the data have not given us that greater confidence. In particular, and as I noted earlier, readings on inflation have come in above expectations.
Well, let's talk to our correspondent, John Terrett. He's at the New York Stock Exchange. So, John, Powell really packed a punch there, didn't he?
Oh, yes, I like it. He packed a punch, and the markets sat up and they paid attention yesterday. It's really funny, actually, because I know what you just played. I heard the clip you just played, and I also know that he said in the course of the press conference after the decision to leave rates unchanged that he thought inflation was still too high and that the path forward was uncertain, all of which sounds a bit flaky. But, you know, Powell is the Dovemeister in chief. He really is. He's the one out there sort of hinting at interest rate cuts and all that stuff, when other members of his FOMC committee are far more hawkish, as we say here. But here's the thing. He said yesterday, he was asked a question, and he said, I think it is unlikely that the next move will be a hike. Well, kabam! Up went the Dow Jones like you've never seen it go up before. I mean, it was like all red, bumping along the bottom all day, waiting for this decision and this announcement. And then he says that, and go up it goes on the Dow. Now, they couldn't sustain that, I'm afraid. At the end, we actually closed with the Dow to the good by 83 points, but it had been much higher than that. And we had the NASDAQ down 52 and the S&P 500 down 17. But here's the point. This is the point. Now we know, we've heard it from the mouth of the boss, that we are going to have interest rates higher for longer than was originally thought. Remember, 6 cuts this year, 1 coming up in June. It's all off the table because of what he said. Now, it's possible that there will be an interest rate cut before the end of the year, and if there isn't, there'll be one in 2025 quite early. And that is the attitude being taken by Wall Street. So that's why the Dow was so significantly up yesterday, and why, as you're going to find out in a second, it's also up this morning, based on optimism for a rate cut. Only one now, but before the end of the year. So let's have a look at the market, shall we? The Dow at the moment is ahead by 0.5% at, what is that, 178 points to the good. And the S&P 500 is ahead by also 0.5% at the moment at 50.41. And the NASDAQ in Times Square is ahead by 1%. And this is all optimism based on what Chairman Powell said yesterday. Now, there's one fly in the ointment, I'm afraid, and that's called Apple. And at 20:30 GMT today, in about 4 hours' time, they're going to give us their earnings. And they might not be very good because they're having a tough time in China. And that could affect things quite a big way when we get to Friday morning. But let's worry about that later. For the time being, Chairman Powell's remarks are lifting spirits here.
Well, I'm sure we'll be talking to you tomorrow about Apple, but today I want to talk to you about TikTok because some kind of deal's been done.
Yes. Well, it's funny, isn't it? Because when I saw that, when I woke up early this morning, and it was already done, and I thought, oh, they've sold it. I thought, you know, ByteDance has gone ahead and sold it, which, of course, they've said they're not going to do. So it wasn't that at all. It's to do with the use of commercially available music on TikTok. Now, Universal is the biggest record label in the world, and the other two big ones are Sony and Warner Brothers, but Universal is bigger than they are. And the thing is, there's been a feud going on for most of this year between Universal and TikTok, because Universal was TikToked off that TikTok was using its commercially available music. People like to make their little posts, but they like to enhance them with their favorite artists. You know, people like Taylor Swift and Drake, and The Weeknd and Adele and Billie Eilish, and my favorite, Shawadi Wadi, of course. Now, the thing is, they can't do that because basically Universal said, we're pulling all our music and it's off, you can't do it. And this is a very big problem because people love to make their little posts on TikTok and they love to enhance it with commercial music. Well, now, today, they've come to an agreement. So I'm not sure what the money side of things is. I'm sure TikTok will pay Universal money to have this service back. But TikTok has had to make one very big, massive concession. Do you know what that is? It is they've been told to, and they have promised, to work with Universal to remove from the site all music that's been created using AI. Isn't that interesting? That's part of the deal. So they've agreed that. Now, remember, TikTok has 170 million users in America. At the moment, it has a ban hanging over its head because it is the law here now that TikTok will be banned in America if it's not sold by the end of the year. And I just asked myself one other question. Why is it that other record labels haven't seemed to get up into TikTok's face in the way that Universal did? And I think it is because it was something Universal wanted to do. They've eventually won it. Other record labels, I think, see the cross-pollination benefits. In other words, it's better to have your songs appearing in short form on these TikToks because it kind of promotes the artist for free. So that's why I think we don't see the other record labels really getting involved in quite the same way. But anyway, this is a happy ending now for Universal and TikTok and 170 million users here in America.
John, thank you very much. Our correspondent John Terrace in New York.
President Xi Jinping has been calling for further green transition and higher quality in China's manufacturing sectors. This as the country looks for new ways to encourage growth.
At the biggest trade fair in China, the eco-friendly movement's being showcased as global buyers return. Our correspondent Huang Fei reports.
International buyers are back at China's biggest trade expo, scouring for deals from a sprawling complex the size of 280 football fields. Over 1 million new products are on display in the spring session, and nearly half are categorized as green and low carbon.
We're buying here maybe more than 40 years. It's a really big change to European style, sustainable. We are European and the German likes to make sustainable.
More and more people are trying to do something to save this poor planet.
Why are you interested in buying from China?
Because for sure the quality is good. I think that this is a country that is looking for the future, and this is the right place to be.
Recycled plastics are used in many of these products, and according to exhibitors, there is a growing demand and preference for eco-friendly materials among customers from the US and Europe. And the focus on green tech is in line with China's drive towards what it calls new quality productive forces. Beijing wants these characteristics to become the new face of Chinese manufacturing as it seeks to expand globally. But expansion is an uphill battle amid weak global demand and ongoing geopolitical tensions. U.S. tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars worth of Chinese imports remain in place, and businesses are still paying the price.
Yes, some countries blockade the Chinese product. We're living a little problem about in custom. You can see this is my 15 years in China in Canton Fair. Yeah, China is heaven of the business. You can find best suppliers, best factory, best partner you can find here.
This company is confident its high-end suitcases will secure large orders from loyal customers. But they're also considering moving some of their production to Southeast Asia.
Because of the politics, we haven't seen many U.S. clients here, and our European clients are also reducing Chinese orders. But we've seen substantial growth in Southeast Asia and South America, so we're thinking of building factories overseas. Our headquarters will remain in China because I believe with our strong design capabilities, China remains a top choice for high-end bags.
China's foreign trade grew by 5% year-on-year to $1.4 trillion in the first quarter, the fastest pace in nearly 2 years. The Ministry of Commerce expects growth to continue in the second quarter.
Chinese manufacturing has become very advanced today. This is thanks to decades of technology and management expertise, as well as an understanding of markets. But I believe the future is in supply-side structural reform. Value for money is not a sustainable goal. Considering our aging workforce and limited environmental resources, we should strive to make fundamental technological breakthroughs to increase the value of our exports.
To boost foreign trade, the Ministry of Commerce has highlighted customs initiatives such as enhancing port services and helping companies reduce costs and fees. For exporters, the challenge lies in producing high-quality, innovative products sustainably. While affordability is important, analysts say exporters must create products so compelling that international markets are willing to pay a premium for them. Hong Fei, CGTN, Guangzhou.
Oil giant Shell has reported first quarter profits of $7.7 billion, ahead of expectations and despite disruption to shipping in the Red Sea. Cash flow was up 6% on the previous quarter to $13.3 billion, boosted by strong sales of liquefied natural gas. Shell says it will buy back a further $3.5 billion of its shares over the next 3 months, while maintaining its dividend to investors.
Shares of Chinese EV maker NIO jumped 20% after its deliveries more than doubled in April to more than 15,000. That's an increase of 130% year-on-year. Competition has intensified in China, the world's biggest auto market, with major EV makers engaging in a price war.
Uber is facing a multi-million-dollar lawsuit from London's black cab taxi drivers. More than 10,000 of them accuse the company of unlawfully taking business away from other drivers. They say Uber misled the city's authorities to obtain an operating license. Uber has denied the allegations and says it operates lawfully in London.
Danish drug maker Novo Nordisk's profits are on the up as its customers are seeing their weight stay down.
It reported first quarter profits of $3.65 billion, better than expected. Constraints on supply of its Wegovy and Ozempic weight loss drugs and competition in the market forced the company to cut prices, but it's now boosting shipments to meet demand. The company is so successful that it is currently Europe's most valuable, worth about $570 billion. That is bigger than Denmark's entire economy.
Well, such is the demand for those Novo Nordisk drugs that stocks for those people who need it are running low and they're being forced to use cheaper alternatives. Denmark has said it will start patients with type 2 diabetes on different drugs, while doctors were ordered to stop prescribing Ozempic to those without the condition almost a year ago.
We're joined now by Victoria Knight, health reporter for US news site Axios. Victoria, thanks for joining us. Novo Nordisk says in the USA alone, 25,000 new patients a week are getting these semaglutide drugs, which basically drastically cut the appetite. Do you think these drugs are ushering in a new era where we're going to turn the tide on global obesity?
Thanks so much for having me. And it's a great question. I think we still have a lot that's unknown. But as you said, huge numbers of people in the U.S. are starting this drug every week, as Novo Nordisk said this morning. I think obviously this drug is effective. It's shown, studies show that it helps people lose 15 to 20% of their weight. But the thing is, one of the kind of unknown questions is, do you need to take this drug all your life for that weight to remain off of you? And I think there's just not enough research yet to know if that's true. And then another huge barrier for these is the cost of these drugs. In the U.S., these drugs can cost over $1,000 for a month's supply. So that can really be a lot for someone and insurance doesn't always cover them. So these are two of the big questions.
The cost of the drugs extraordinarily high in many countries across the world. But of course, the question then is, we have to compare it to the cost of obesity. We know that it brings with it myriad health risks. How much is obesity costing health systems?
Yeah, that's a great question. In the U.S., according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, it costs the U.S. $173 billion per year. And in the U.S., over 40% of people qualify as obese. So it's really a huge percent of the population that could potentially benefit from this drug. But again, the cost of the drugs themselves are expensive. But on the other hand, the obesity costs the U.S. healthcare system a lot as well.
Is there a case to be made for these drugs to actually be paid for by medical aid insurance schemes or by government health?
Yeah, there is the question of whether, if you're paying a lot of money up front for these drugs, but in the long term, potentially you're kind of reducing the cost of obesity in the long term. There's also evidence that these drugs help reduce the risk of heart disease and stroke. So those are health events that can cost the health system a lot as well. So it's kind of like, do you want to pay up front for these drugs that will help perhaps prevent more costly health outcomes later down the line? Or do you want to pay for them later down the line? So that is something that's really playing out in the U.S. right now. There's a question of whether the federal government wants to pay for these drugs. They're paying for them for people who have heart disease, but they do not allow the federal government to pay for these drugs just for people who want to take them for weight loss. So it's kind of something that's up in the air right now, but it's a big question.
Yeah, and one that will continue to be debated. Thank you very much, Victoria Knight, health reporter for US news site Axios.
Thank you.
Healthcare company Johnson & Johnson is proposing to offer nearly $6.5 billion to settle tens of thousands of lawsuits over its baby powder. The cases concern allegations that the product contains asbestos and causes ovarian cancer. The pharmaceutical giant discontinued sales of its baby powder in North America in 2020 and worldwide in 2023. The company will begin a 3-month voting period in the hope of reaching a consensus on all current and future claims.
You're watching CGTN. Still to come, aid trucks enter northern Gaza as Israel reopens the Erez border crossing for the first time since the conflict began.
This week on Razor, travelling back in time using the DNA of our ancient ancestors.
When the pendant arrived, it was still covered in sediment as it was found. We first want to wash off the sediment and also analyze the sediment because we want to compare then the DNA that we find in the sediment to the DNA we find in the pendant. And that allows us to make some comparisons that the DNA that we find is really from the maker or the wearer of the pendant.
Hello, welcome back. Aid trucks are entering Gaza through the northern Erez crossing. It's the first time Israel has opened the border checkpoint since the conflict began.
This comes a day after U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and called for more humanitarian aid deliveries into Gaza. The Erez crossing, primarily used for foot traffic, has been closed since it was destroyed during the October 7th Hamas attacks.
Our correspondent Akram Al-Satri is in Rafah.
The situation is still extremely dire. Minimum much needed aid entered the northern Gaza area. 30 truckloads that are sent by the Jordanian Commission for Humanitarian Relief. 30 truckloads for around 400,000 Palestinians. And there is another side of the issue. The side of the issue is the side of accessibility, the side of the continuous military escalation in the area that has been preventing even the truck drivers from delivering that much needed aid for the people who need it. Just 1 hour ago, a truck was targeted by the area of Al-Kuwaiti roundabout. The driver of that truck was killed and 2 others were injured. And that truck was carrying much needed needed aid for the people in the Gaza North and Gaza City, and was hoping, the driver at least was hoping, that he would be successfully able to deliver that food for the people who need it. So the situation has nothing to do with the truckloads, although they are extremely important in this very critical time. But still, the overall security situation that has been prevailing in Gaza and Gaza North plays a very important role in making possible the access to those much needed humanitarian aid. So the number of trucks that are allowed into Gaza is still way below the minimum, and the security situation and the way the Israeli occupation forces have been dealing with those trucks that are entering the Gaza Strip are also preventing people from accessing those humanitarian aid. So the situation is still complex, and there should be some mechanism to ensure that this aid is protected, the trucks are protected, and the personnel who are working to deliver that much needed aid for the people to help them survive are also protected.
And what about central Gaza, where there's been some heavy fighting?
Indeed, central Gaza has been witnessing heavy fighting, and this time the heavy fighting is coming from the side of the Palestinian factions who have been targeting the area of Netzarim X, where they have been launching mortar attacks against the Israeli troops positioned in that particular area. The Israelis have deployed one battalion in that area, one brigade in that area, and they have technically withdrawn from all the cities, the centers of the Palestinian cities, and that made them a target for the Palestinian factions. We have been hearing for the last few days about several ambushes, several bombardments, and several mortar launches from different parts of the Gaza Strip, be it on the central Gaza or from the Gaza city side. And that made that position, Netzarim position, made the Israeli troops in between Gaza northern, southern area and central Gaza northern area. And from those both sides, the Palestinian factions have been using the mortar shells, have been using the short-range projectiles to target the Israeli troops that are deployed into that area. So that is becoming gradually an ambush and trap for the Israeli troops who are staying in that area, and that has been causing several injuries and death among the troops that are entered there, that are in that area. So now even the Israelis are targeting the area of Az-Zaytun neighborhood, where the mortars come from, and also the area of Al-Mughraqa, where some more mortars are coming in. So they are trying to fight on both fronts, and they have been sustaining some damages and losses because of that strategy that has been followed by the Palestinian factions. Also, at the very same time, they have been targeting different residential blocks in Al-Mughraqa, destroying them every day, destroying whole blocks every day, but that did not prevent the fighting from continuing, and that did not prevent the losses from taking place within their soldiers and within their troops.
All right, Martin Lowe is in Jerusalem and joins us now. Hello, Martin. Israel's War Cabinet meeting this evening seems that it's going to be a pretty crucial one. Has it got underway as yet?
Yes, the War Cabinet is now in session. It'll be interesting to see if they can come up with a way forward, because both sides seem pretty intractable at the moment. Israel is proposing a 6-week ceasefire in return for the freeing of some hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails. But Hamas is saying they will only enter into a release of hostages if Israel declares that the war is over and there will be no more attacks. Hamas has been talking quite tough today. They've been saying that Israel's continuing threats to attack Rafah, the last remaining enclave in the south of Gaza, are simply designed to put them under pressure to cave into Israel's demands. They say the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is hallucinating if he thinks they will raise the white flag. However, Hamas has also said that it will be returning to Cairo for more ceasefire talks in the coming days with a positive spirit. But whether that's just a delaying tactic, we don't know. The War Cabinet basically has two options, don't they? They can try to improve the offer, but it's difficult to see what they can come up with that will appeal to Hamas without betraying their own principles. Or they can follow the advice of some of the hawks in the Israeli government who say, don't bother, rip the deal up, take it off the table, simply take the military action, seize Rafah, and do your best to rescue as many hostages as you can. One sobering comment from the United Nations today, they say even if the war stopped today, it would take until 2040 to rebuild all the houses that have been destroyed in just 7 months of fighting.
Otten Lowe coming to us live from Jerusalem there.
Since the conflict began, our correspondent Noor Harazin has been reporting for us almost daily from inside Gaza. Noor, like everyone in Gaza, has been directly affected by the violence and was often very close to danger on and off air.
Here she describes her experience of the last 7 months and the personal impact of living and reporting in a war zone.
We saw mostly children. I mean, this is indescribable. This is like a massacre, but me standing right here in the hospital, I can clearly tell you that the number is going up.
Hello everyone, this is Noor Harazin from Gaza.
I have to believe and live through the fact that no one is safe in Gaza, that I could just get killed in any day, in any time. I am one of a small number of TV correspondents here in Gaza. Israel has banned the entry of international journalists into Gaza. So now all of the responsibility is on the shoulders of the Palestinian journalists. It is a responsibility. It is a duty, actually, to tell the people who are watching the TVs about what is happening here on the ground in Gaza. I witnessed 4 Israeli wars on Gaza. I witnessed hundreds of escalations. However, nothing is like this one. Gaza's infrastructure is totally damaged. I mean, talking about electricity, water, network, internet. Also, food infrastructure in Gaza is destroyed. I mean, talking about most of the bakeries in Gaza, the supermarkets, the farms, everything is destroyed. Every single tiny little detail in my life has changed. I mean, now I am living as a displaced Palestinian in Rafah city. I lost my home. My home was totally burned by an Israeli missile. I managed to somehow control my fears and control my emotions, because what is happening here and what we witnessed here is actually horrific. I lost in total 24 members of my family, Harazin family, and I've also lost a number of friends, a number of colleagues, journalists, reporters, TV correspondents, but the biggest loss for me was the fact that I had to evacuate my children outside of Gaza. I do feel that social media is very important. I mean, I am now at more than 500,000 followers in less than 4 months. Every single day I'm getting the hundreds of messages on social media of people supporting me. Hey Noor, we love you. Please stay strong. You are our hero. This is what is keeping me going. This is what is giving me this energy. I am such a foodie. I mean, I love food. Most of the humanitarian aid is actually canned, processed food. It is not very healthy, and actually it does not taste very good. I will leave Gaza for some time out with my children and with my family, because I miss them so much. The first thing that I will do is that I think that I will sleep for 1 whole day. I will just close my eyes, separate myself from the whole world, and just take a very long sleep.
That's our correspondent Noor Harazin's account of her time reporting for us from Gaza. And as Noor said, both she and her family have now left Gaza safely.
US President Joe Biden says freedom of speech and the rule of law must be respected as protests over the Gaza conflict sweep across college campuses. Police moved in to clear a pro-Palestine encampment at the University of California's Los Angeles campus. Protesters were warned to leave or face arrest after the college said that the tent encampment was unlawful. Well, let's talk to our correspondent Adiz Tianshan, who is in Los Angeles. So, Adiz, what more can you tell us?
Well, a lot has happened overnight and this morning here at University of California, Los Angeles. What you see behind me is what is now left of the encampment. All of the students here, up until last night, there were hundreds of them. They have all been evacuated. forcefully. And this did not just happen suddenly. It was a long hours of standoff and what the students would call resistance on their part. We understand they came here essentially prepared with helmets and knee pads, and they did expect, it seems, some kind of police crackdown, especially in light of what happened the night before. On Tuesday night, if you remember, a large mob, essentially, I don't want to call them counter-protesters because we've had pro-Israeli counter-protesters who arrived here, you know, with their message, showing their faces, giving interviews. But 2 nights ago, what unfolded with that mob coming with their sort of faces hidden with masks on, attacking these protesters. There were several hours of violence, you know, fireworks being set off on these protesters. And it was really marked as the most violent night here on this campus in decades, in recent memory. So that really seems to have tarnished what's going on here. And following that event, it just appears the university administration has kind of changed their attitude, their approach to these protesters. Up until, you know, just a couple of days ago, they were still very much supportive of their right to protest, their freedom of speech, etc. But just in recent days, they now called it unlawful, and it all happened overnight, essentially with large police forces storming into this area, just one step at a time. They've essentially calmed this whole area. In the beginning, a lot of students were injured. They were taken to the hospitals. Some students, they simply didn't want to face arrest, and so they just surrendered and left the camp. But there were still scores of people left up until 4 a.m. this morning. After hours of this standoff, a lot of them were still forming human chains, essentially refusing to leave this place. But at the end of the day, they gave in, and this is what you see. Now there's a large cleanup effort in this area. We're hearing from officials that within the day, all of this area will be cleared up, and there will now be more security to make sure these protesters don't come back.
And those protests in California being mirrored elsewhere in the country. At Columbia University in New York, mounting anger over how police have handled those protests.
Most certainly. I mean, it just seems a very similar incidents of violence all around the country. But the dynamics is quite different when you look at UCLA versus another institution in California. USC, for example, had a rather similar approach to Columbia University, where they unleashed the police force right away to break down what was happening on their campus, mainly because it's a private university in a private gated land, so they could. Now, what happened in Columbia University is kind of exceptional because it's really the iconic movement. That's where it all started back in April 18, and as the movement grew, within a week or so, with that initial crackdown of the police, a lot of the people in that community criticized the police brutality there. There were days of arrest, never-ending violence, and we understand it was only after that sort of fueled the protests even further. And when you look here at UCLA and what happened since last night, a lot of the students we spoke to, protesters, say the protests here are not over either, that they will still find a way to come back.
Adiz, thank you. Our correspondent, Adiz Tianshan in Los Angeles.
The death toll from a highway collapse in China's Guangdong province has risen to 48 as emergency workers continue to recover cars from the scene.
President Xi Jinping has ordered an investigation. Our correspondent Omar Khan reports.
A press conference just wrapped up here in Meizhou in Dapu County, where officials spoke to the media about the expressway collapse that occurred yesterday morning at around 2:10 a.m. The latest figures we have here are 48 deaths. That number has risen over the past 24 hours. Of those 48 deaths, 3 people, their identity has yet to be confirmed. medical experts are conducting DNA tests, but that number has grown. The latest one here is 48. They also mentioned that 30 people were injured in the incident. All of those individuals are at the hospital receiving treatment. None of them are experiencing any life-threatening injuries, so there is hope for them to be okay. And as well, the number of vehicles involved in this incident still remains at 23. Now, this expressway is here in eastern Guangdong province, very close to Fujian province. It's part of a highway that runs between the two provinces here in South China. And this incident occurred yesterday at around 2:10 a.m. local time in the darkness in the middle of the night when suddenly that part of the highway collapsed into a valley, causing not only the accident, but a backlog of traffic. Now, officials have also not been able to mention the cause of this. That is all under investigation as research and investigative teams have not only come from the province, but from across the country. You have medical experts from top universities across Guangdong province, all converging here on the city of Meizhou. And we're going to be following this as this story continues to develop. But the latest is that all of those vehicles have been pulled out of the rubble, and now it's time to investigate and look into the cause of why this took place.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. With Hungary, the third stop on President Xi's upcoming visit to Europe, we look at how Budapest acts as a stepping stone for Chinese investment in Europe. Welcome back to Global Business Europe with Robin Dwyer and me, Sally Burdett. The headlines once more. The OECD upgrades its outlook for the global economy thanks to strong growth figures from China and the United States. More pain for American households and businesses as interest rates remain on hold. And better than expected profits for weight loss drug maker Novo Nordisk as Europe's most valuable company races to meet demand. Chinese and Serbian workers have begun construction of Serbia's new national stadium and venues, which will host a major exhibition in 3 years' time. Serbia's president and the Chinese ambassador to Serbia attended the groundbreaking ceremony in Belgrade. The project is sponsored by Power China, one of the world's largest power construction businesses. It's hoped the national stadium will become a landmark in the Serbian capital. Huawei is helping build Hungary's biggest storage facility for solar energy. It's hoped the $22 million plant will play a major role in Hungary's bid to move towards more renewable energy sources. Our correspondent Pablo Gutierrez reports.
Even when clouds dim the sky, Hungary aims to maintain its solar energy production. On the outskirts of Szolnok, Hungary, near one of the largest solar farms in the country, Hungarian and Chinese companies are building a $22 million solar energy storage facility. The government says this initiative will help bolster Hungary's power generation capacity.
So the main problem or difficulty with solar that the sun is not always shining, the energy is fluctuating, but the consumption needs to always be in balance with the production. And that's why these batteries are a good opportunity to have this balancing in the system.
Bargeli says that the electric batteries in this project will store energy when production solar peaks and release it when demand is high. This could also help Hungary reduce its reliance on non-renewable energy sources.
Yeah, so this is the main goal for the electrification. We would like to reduce the gas consumption of the country, and we would like to put all the other generation to renewables, so mainly solar, but possibly wind also.
Currently, Hungary relies mainly on nuclear and natural gas to produce electricity. Solar energy generated through photovoltaic cells converting sunlight into electricity contributes to around 13% of the total energy mix. But this is likely to change as the country steps up efforts to boost solar energy. Hungary's government says that storing more of the sun's rays collected in solar farms like this one will help it achieve one of its main climate goals of becoming carbon neutral by 2050. Forestbuild, the Hungarian company building the storage facility in Szolnok, says the project will double Hungary's solar energy storage capacity from 30 megawatt hours to 60. Experts say this will give Hungary an edge over other countries in the region.
We are interconnecting countries, which means that Hungary has strong connection with Slovakia, Austria, even the Ukrainian connection started to work, but we are connected to the Serbian and other system. It means that in a situation when we are producing more photovoltaic, we can easily sell it to the other countries.
The energy storage facility will be operational by next summer, according to the Hungarian government, which also plans to build more facilities like this one across the country. Bargeli says China's support is crucial for these projects.
They are really advanced in battery energy storage systems, and the supplier of the energy storage and power conversion system of our current projects is Huawei. They are a really strong partner of our company.
This partnership, Bargeli says, could bring a bright new era for Hungary's clean energy production. Pablo Gutierrez, Budapest.
Hungary is the third stop on President Xi Jinping's visit to Europe. Radovan Jelasic is the managing director of Erste Bank Hungary, also president of the Hungarian Banking Association.
China is and has been for the last decade one of the most prosperous and more dynamic countries for the Hungarian trade. We had 7.6 billion euros of FDIs in 2023. We expect this number almost to double in the next couple of years. And I think also for the Chinese investors, Hungary obviously plays a major role as far as investment in Central Eastern Europe is concerned. I think it's also important to mention that in addition to the chemical industry that is already here from China, in addition to telecommunication into the banking sector, we are also expecting some other additional investment, especially in the automobile industry. The new ones that are coming, that are already in the way, is among others Kettle, but also BYD, which is going to build up a factory in Szeged. So we are all excited, and we are hoping that is going to boost the future economic relationships as well then.
Now, we have the Belt and Road Initiative that is currently developing the railway between Belgrade and Budapest, and also this oil pipeline between Hungary and Serbia. Aside from that, what has been the impact in the Hungarian economy of the BRI?
Listen, we are aware that infrastructure developments are representing, so to say, the backbone of the sustainable and long-term economic growth. In addition to the issues already mentioned, let me just raise the fact that there are weekly 17 direct flights between Hungary and China, which is also cementing, so to say, the good relationship. As far as I'm aware, there is no other country in the CE where there are more direct flights from China than to Hungary. I think it's very important. And I do hope that this also represents represents, so to say, a good welcome to all the Chinese businessmen who are coming over to Europe, because obviously then Hungary is going to be one of the major board and major, so to say, jumping stones for all of their businesses in Central and Eastern Europe. You already mentioned the Budapest-Belgrade train. That infrastructural piece fits perfectly into the South-North relationship between Piraeus through the Western Balkans all over to Budapest, and we do hope that this is also contribute to a cheaper, faster and economically more reliable relationship between not only Hungary and China, but between European Union and China as well then.
China has a large population of migrant workers who travel within the country to work long-term elsewhere, typically moving from rural to urban areas. The latest official data shows that the total number last year was 297 million, an increase of nearly 2 million on the previous year. But things are changing. Although there are still over 150 million people employed in the developed eastern region, that number has fallen around 1% from the previous year. Meanwhile, the less developed central and western regions of China saw an increase of 3% and nearly 2% respectively. Many migrant workers are employed in the service industry, and that number is still growing, while workers in construction are down around 2%. Migrant workers have been a pivotal force in China's modernization. The country's been pushing for reforms to smooth the way for more rural workers to settle down in cities. At this year's two sessions, the central government reiterated its call for local authorities to get rid of the household registration barriers in cities with a population of less than 3 million. I've been speaking to Rana Mitter, director of the University of Oxford China Centre.
I'd say that migrant workers have been one of the most important elements of China's economic growth in the last 20 or 30 years. When people look at what you might consider almost the iconic scenes of China in recent years, which is the skyscrapers, the high-speed railways, the new roads, all of them have been built, of course, by Chinese migrant workers from the countryside. And it's those village Chinese, the people living out in the countryside, who have made their way to the construction sites, who've really been at the heart of that building boom that really drove China's economy in a big way through much of the 1990s into the late 2010s. So rural workers have been crucial to China's economic progress.
So, as you say, big changes in China. What about the role of migrant workers, though? Has that changed too?
It's changing. I would say that one of the major political issues that China has had to face, and not really yet resolved, is the question of how to make migrant labourers a fully embedded part of the working population. China has an internal passport system known as the hukou, which means that you don't take your welfare rights and your resident rights with you. So that means that their children, for instance, have to stay behind in the countryside and often get a much more deprived level of education than they would have done if they'd been allowed to move to the city.
We are, though, now, according to this latest report, seeing some change in the level of education of these migrant workers and also where they work, the industries they work in.
Yes, it's a change that's coming from a real low, though. It's worth noting that human capital, as economists sometimes call it, in other words, educating and bringing the population of a country up to a higher level, has always been higher in the cities than in the countryside in China. People often don't know that compulsory education is only free up to the age of 12. After that, you have to pay a fee. In some areas, it's not high. But for rural workers who tend to have lower incomes, it's been much harder to get to those education levels because it costs a lot. And therefore, from that point of view, it's welcome to see that there is some upturn in both schools and higher education for the rural population, but it's going to have to go a lot further if China wants to get to that place where service economies, consumer goods and technologically enabled higher value-added jobs really include the rural population. It's the beginning of a journey. It's a very long way from the end of it.
So what about the future then? We have seen a slight increase in the number of migrant workers this year compared to last. Do you think we'll see that number continue to increase?
There's a question of how far it's necessary to actually move the population, particularly when employment prospects in the cities are becoming more difficult. Right now, youth unemployment is very high in many of China's cities, and therefore there may be concern about moving too many unemployed rural workers into those areas. So as in many countries, there's a lot of balances between the different factors that are currently depressing China's economy, but may be solved over time if the rural and urban sectors of the population are rebalanced in terms of where they live.
And there's more about why an increasing number of Chinese people are moving to the countryside in our China Explained series on our digital platforms.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead.
Snaps from daily life. Are we reporting from the University of Manchester on a photo competition aiming to boost cultural understanding between China and the UK?
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
Unprecedented scenes that we saw.
The clean-up operation is now well and truly underway.
Parts of southern Europe remain in a state of emergency.
Context gives meaning. People make history.
Far more than 1,000 people have come here today.
But authorities are still on high alert.
So now we've actually become the border on this road.
A complex world demands a comprehensive view.
But with the cleanup efforts more or less under control,
the economic impact is bound to ripple across the country.
There's plastic pollution everywhere.
Because the world today matters for your world tomorrow.
This is the living area of the crew.
The focus is firmly on future technologies.
Well, this is something completely different.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Hello, welcome back. 8 years since the idea to create a refugee Olympic team was born, the third team has been chosen for the Games coming up in Paris in July.
A symbol of hope for the more than 100 million people who've been displaced around the world. The impact of the Olympic refugee team goes far beyond the Games themselves. Our correspondent Victoria Ennis reports.
Those forced to flee, those seeking refuge. We represent the hope of millions.
Many of them have already completed the hardest journey of their lives. Now they're facing a different challenge, having been selected to compete in Paris as part of the refugee Olympic team.
Omid Ahmadazifar, boxing.
From 74 athletes, 36 were chosen to compete in this year's Games, which kick off on July 26th. They come from 11 countries, representing 12 sports. They say it's a dream come true.
I'm so happy and so proud.
I still cannot believe it that I'm going to the Paris.
We're just going to go out there and do our job, and obviously at the end of the day we're all family.
This team will be the third of its kind to take part and the largest after the idea was first conceived ahead of the Rio Games in 2016, a way of celebrating talent while raising awareness. It has been a roaring success ever since. 29 athletes competed in Tokyo in 2020, and this year even more heading to Paris, walking out with a brand new emblem to represent them and hoping to reach the podium.
There will be more than half of the world population will follow these Olympic Games, and they will cheer for them, sending this symbol of hope to the more than 100 million people who unfortunately, had to migrate, and to make the world aware of the magnitude of this crisis.
It's not just about competing on the day, it's also about increasing access to sport for all young people who have had to leave their homes, proving that from grassroots to the elite level, sport can be a symbol of hope.
When I started dreaming Olympic Games in Afghanistan, I thought that's impossible to realize my dream because of in Afghanistan we had a problem with the security situation, barriers and limitation for women's rights, but finally I just keep hoping and work for it, and finally I realized my dream.
A reminder that the Olympic flame burns for everyone. Victoria Innes, CGTN.
Now, can everyday moments become art? And can photos break down cultural barriers? Just some of the questions raised by this year's UK-China photography competition.
Hundreds of people from both countries entered the contest held at the University of Manchester. Our correspondent Catherine Drew reports.
Everyday routines in the UK and in China, captured in an image. Daily Ritual, the theme of this year's annual photography competition, held jointly by the University of Manchester and China's Yunnan University.
The goal of these photographs is to help ordinary Chinese and ordinary Britons see themselves in the eyes of each other.
Well, some of these images feature commuting, which of course is a daily ritual for millions of us around the world. Let me show you this one. Workers waiting to go home in China, lined up at the end of the day. And right next door we have this image of a lone cyclist captured in Salford. That's very close to Manchester. And finally, this romantic moment of tenderness on the Guangzhou metro system. Three striking images, very different, but highlighting those differences and the similarities between the cultures. Among 30 highly commended, there were 2 overall winners, one from the UK and one from China. Love in a Small Town, which shows a cleaner working under the image of an umbrella, was submitted by Hongwei Zhang, who sent a message of thanks.
I'm incredibly excited and delighted by my win.
The UK winning picture showed a group of women dealing with mental and other health challenges through cold water swimming during the COVID lockdown.
We're all linked. Everybody needs that little community to be together, to say how they're feeling. And just the same as them ladies there, they need us, them people as well, their little community. So it doesn't matter where you're from, who you are, how rich or how poor, you still need your little group of people.
Lending support, China's Consul General in Manchester said he hoped to see similar projects across British and Chinese universities.
There's a deficit, I would like to say, about knowledge between China and UK. It's true that Chinese people, especially the young people, they can name the football teams, but in China, I doubt there are people in UK they can name the Chinese football teams. We encourage more UK young students to go to China, to travel to China, to know more about China.
Organisers say the competition is part of continuing efforts to integrate Manchester's nearly 9,000 Chinese students into UK life.
We tend to hear about conflicts and clashes between, say, China and the UK. And so the focus in the day-to-day is on difference. It's this kind of framework that overemphasizes difference, which, in my view, is dangerous. And so we need to be reminded of our common humanity.
Catherine Drew, CGTN, Manchester.
And finally, in a first for the country, China is heading to the dark side of the moon.
The Chang'e 6 probe is due to blast off on Friday with the aim of collecting the first samples from the lunar far side. Preparations are underway at the Wenchang launch site with live coverage of the launch beginning on CGTN at 8:30 GMT.
The headlines again. The OECD upgrades its outlook for the global economy thanks to strong growth figures from China and the United States.
More pain for American households and businesses as interest rates remain on hold.
And better than expected profits for drug maker Novo Nordisk as Europe's most valuable company races to meet demand.
And that's a Global Business Europe for today. Thank you so much for watching.
Coming up next on CGTN, it's Africa Live. We'll see you again tomorrow. Same time, same place. From all of the team here in London, it's goodbye.